Why don't I start with a disclaimer? We are a biotech company, and myself, I want to explain my background a bit, just so I'm not overstepping my bounds as far as my education. I'm not an MD, so I can't speak on the medical side of it. But we do have a very specific role that each one of us are playing in a team. We have engineers, we have cardiologists, we have entrepreneurs on our team. And basically what I want to do today is give a quick outline of our story, give a quick outline of where we are today, and give a quick takeaway of what biotech industry is like. You know, you're hearing about all these startups that are coming out, being acquisitions, and wearable devices, cool things that are happening that everyone's trying to figure out how to get into it. More importantly, everyone's trying to figure out how to get revenue and exit. And so I want to give that quick overview, and we're in pretty early stage comparable. And so I'd like to give, at the end, lessons learned and what exactly I'm learning. Let's start with the team. So as I mentioned, we have a really solid team consisting of MIT engineers and health economists, a cardiologist out of Brigham, and a serial entrepreneur. Myself, I'm playing the regulatory role. So healthcare startups has a series of regulations. I like to call them hindrances to innovation, and really FDA coming in to stop innovation from happening, and it really slows down the process. And so that's where I come in, is trying to streamline that process, making sure that all the IRBs, FDAs, clinical trials, all that paperwork is taken care of, and that's my role on that side. Quick story about us. We actually started off not too long ago, last year. There was a MedTech hackathon. If you know a little bit about a hackathon, basically what it is you bring together engineers and clinicians, as well as entrepreneurs together in a room, and you give them the toughest problem. And healthcare as an industry is tough to begin with because you have so many different issues that you're dealing with, and you're dealing with lives. So there's a lot of regulations that come in with the government. And so this hackathon, we just got together, and ironically, we were actually not there to compete. We were there to congratulate Raj, that's there. He's the cardiologist in the white coat, and his fiance is a good friend of ours, and we were hanging out with her, and she told us that she had just gotten engaged that weekend, the weekend before, and we had just met Raj, and he pitched this idea of stress tests. And he was mentioning how there's so many stress tests, and anybody who they want to check physical capabilities, they have to order a $3,000 stress test, and it's completely unnecessary, especially for someone who's age 40, 45, and they don't necessarily need a stress test. They're sort of active, but they're not really telling you truly how active they are, and an MD can't figure out how active they are, whether they're at risk or not. And so we said, fine, we'll design something that can be a stress test. You could do it with anything. You can, those bracelets that you see, Nike Fit, and all the other wearable devices. We chose to do a ring mainly because they had just gotten engaged, and so we were like, hey, let's create a ring. Let's see what happens. So there came Ringleader, and we made the pitch. It was hilarious, and I think it was more of a pitch contest rather than a business contest, and we ended up winning the whole thing. And now we're like, okay, we actually have to work on this now. And as the business plan got through, and we had a core team that was really engaged, really we were having fun. And while we're having fun, we're creating something, a real solution to a real problem. And in that came Ringleader. And as our due diligence continued, we found out that stress test market is very slim. You have to make sure that your data is precise, accurate, and better than what already exists, and then go through the entire regulatory process, the entire way, IRBs, IP, and we found out that it's better to chase down something else that's right at our beachhead, and it's a huge problem, which is stroke, cardiovascular disease, and all things leading to failure of heart rate. And what we found with the same tools that we were using in the ring, which is your basic EKG, pulse ox, some accelerometer data, and the interaction between the data, we found that we could find a regularly irregular beat, which happens sometime in the 3-month mark, and currently there aren't any tools available to test this. And so we said we can come up with an algorithm and figure out when your heart is giving a random murmur, if you want to say. You feel it, you don't necessarily know what is there, And it only comes once in 3 months, so you have that continuous monitoring problem. And the only tool that's there is what they call a Holter monitor. Basically, you have a 12-lead EKG, meaning you have about 15 different leads. You're attached to it, you wear it for the entire day. It's not waterproof, and you can wear it for up to 48 hours until the battery dies, and that's the monitoring that's available currently. So we're hoping, like I said, we're in early stage, so it's not out in the market yet. We can't go out and buy a ring yet, just yet. We're hoping that it comes out. But really our solution is that you put on a ring, it's lasting for 30 days, maybe 90 days. So right now we have the capacity to last for 30 days. We're thinking we can recharge it, give you 2 rings because it costs about $10 to $30 to make it. And then you can recharge the other one while it's lasting. And while you're doing the recharging, it's monitoring continuously your health data, specifically your cardiovascular data. And we want to target this specifically for anyone who we think is at risk. Healthy, not necessarily any cohort that has cardiovascular disease. We're thinking 65 and older would be ideal to chase down first. And anytime you find this irregularly regular heart rate, which is known as PAF, paroxysmal arterial fibrillation, we want to make sure that you have basic blood thinners. Advil, everybody takes, they say take a baby Advil, right? And so why would you take a baby Advil if you don't have something? And more importantly, why should you not take baby Advil if you do have something? And that's where the medical intervention comes in. So if we can detect this mechanism, we can potentially avoid stroke in the future by simply taking a pill a day. And that's what the medical intervention comes through. And that's really what we're hoping to do with this ring. And in that pivot mode where we had, first we're looking at stress, and now we're looking at stroke, and this really obscure algorithm that's coming in, which is a software, hardware play, we're getting all this press, and we were getting a lot of traction. And from an accelerator to press and trying to manage what's going on as far as technology development, and then at the same time with medical devices, we have an entirely regulatory body. And so sometimes we're sitting there and one of us is talking about it while others are in the lab producing this technology, and we're, literally the technology looked exactly like that. You see that mess on the bottom? That was our lab desk. And we ended up creating this ring that came up, and that traction is really what got us going to the next level. And now we're sitting in an accelerator. We're trying to figure out the key mechanisms as far as building a business model and making sure that the technology is targeted and precise enough to pass all the FDA regulations, to have some intellectual property, because any business, especially in the medical tech side, is great. And when you have that business going through with IP and patents, it's valuable at the end. We're not really sure if we can do that because we're using a lot of the commodity products. And plus, there's a recent US Supreme Court with software patenting, and so this algorithm patents, it's really tough to get into as well. And so while we're trying to solve this very highly needed solution, having to survive and have a valid business model so that you can have a recurring revenue so that you can innovate and keep the model going, that's the challenging part. And that's what the medical industry brings. And that's really what the pain points that come in the medical industry. You have your regular business meaning, I'm thinking, let's say telecom, you have your industries that's going on, but medical technology is an entirely new realm. And you come up with multiple revenues because you have so many customers. The customer meaning one is your patient, but the patient doesn't pay. So your customer really, it could be an insurance company, but sometimes the insurance company says, I'm sorry, we don't have a code for that, so we're not gonna pay you. And then we have another customer, which is the hospital. And the hospital has to bring in your technology, and then the last customer is your MD, your clinician. And if the clinician says, I'm not gonna prescribe this, then it's no longer a business model. So it brings a lot of these challenges. And lastly, I'd like to iterate that there's key mechanisms that come in the cohort of medical technologies. I think it's essential to have these 5 items. And that's really what I think is driving our success so far. Clearly, we're not successful just yet because we haven't brought in a dollar amount. And I think that's the marker of success when you can get out in the market in a medical field. And I want to make sure that you have your traditional team, but more importantly, the number one thing that you need in a medical startup is to address a key pain point and not go after a technology solution. So we're chasing down not what the technology is, but how to solve a problem. And once you can find a way to address that problem, once you can pinpoint precisely what that pain point is and recognize that that's a huge pain point within the system, you can always figure out and iterate. And you have MIT and Harvard next door that can figure out any solution, especially a technology solution. They can create anything, and technology is so advanced that you can really come up with any solution that you like. So as long as the problem that you're addressing is a well-needed and required solution. Oh, thank you.
I'm going to come around with the microphone, so if you have a question, just hold on for just a minute.
Hi, so have you considered possible customers outside of a purely medical realm, like in effective computing, where people are wanting to have a need to know the physical state of somebody to help predict how they're feeling emotionally, so computer systems can kind of respond to how people are feeling? Because that's actually my area of research, and one of my challenges is finding portable technologies for things like heart rate monitoring. So I got very excited as soon as I saw this.
Yeah. So I think your question is more along how we can streamline and align the technologies to our daily lifestyle. And is that Google Glass that you're wearing that I see? So I think that's a great tool that you can use. So our thing was, the reason why we went with the Ring is that it's low intrusion into the daily lifestyle. And that's what really I think we need to make sure. Whatever you're doing daily, behavioral change is a huge problem. That's the reason diabetes is an issue, is because we don't do diet and exercise, right? Those are the only things that you need to do to control diabetes, and we don't do it, and that's why it's an issue. But what we usually do, if you walk up the stairs, Google Glass can tell you, hey, instead of walking up these stairs, why don't you just walk up these stairs, because this is a bit longer. Maybe it's that 5 steps that you're taking extra that will take away from and add to the diet and exercise and take away from whatever disease it is that you're suffering. So that intrusion and that streamlining process of having a medical intervention combined with the behavior that you normally do, I think that's the key, and I think everybody's trying to address that, and Google seems to be on point when they're trying to look at streamlining that process. But I don't know if that's well sorted out just yet. I think we're in the process, but we're not there yet.
I have a question regarding the startup capital. So the startup capital. So with this venture, what's the amount of startup capital that you're looking at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we were approached by a few investors, and trying to figure out how to raise money. And traditionally, everybody goes with Series A, B, C and raises their revenue. And since we have a technology development first, we needed to figure out how to get $20,000 to $50,000 to really build the product. And what we found was it was a lot easier to bootstrap it. And so a lot of us are putting in free time and doing it on the side. We have the core capacities within our own team to build the device. And the accelerators and the competitions that we're currently in are all non-equity. And I think that's what we were going down, and to make sure that if you can go down non-equity route, then you have future success potential is a little higher. But device companies are, you have 3 years of development, and you still don't know if you're going to make it, because you still need that first sale to get your step in the door. So far, we haven't been taking any equity investments, but we're definitely bootstrapping and looking at different competitions to get that initial startup.
Do you have a patent?
We are patent pending, so we filed a bunch of patents, but it takes about 2 years to get those patents. And as we are iterating on the product, that patent changes. And so, we filed our provisionals, we filed everything else, but we don't have a full patent just yet.
Do you have a working prototype?
We have a working prototype, and actually at that hackathon we had
Is it beyond the breadboard stage?
Say that again?
Is it beyond the breadboard stage?
The question that we're trying to address is how to get a flexible board to wrap around your ring, and to get that to get a system that has a flexible battery board, we're trying to address that, but we have it, it's clunky, it's not appealing to look at when you look at it on somebody's finger. But we're trying to figure out the technology, how to fit that all into a ring, which is 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters.
And for our last question,
Hi, I was wondering, have you guys looked at like the Nike Band and the Fitbit business models a bit more? Because it seems like you could possibly port over, even though it's more consumer end and probably less regulations, but actually, I don't know, maybe like your back end, how they view the metrics, how the, medical folks can share the metrics with each other, and different ways to make the business side more valuable. Because it seems like your product is just, it's time to get there, but how you sell to these medical companies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and thing that Nike has is a whole lot of data. So what we thought we could do is the data that we're getting collected from this device, we could probably use it for pharmaceutical companies or healthcare providers that can use that data to target their sales for blood thinners. We thought about that, and really the difference between consumer versus us, a medical device, is the regulations that you have to go through. We can easily jump into a consumer market and start selling the ring or have pre-sales and then quickly develop it. But it's not a medical device, it's not validated, the claims that you're making aren't supported with clinical data. And I think that's what we're looking at, is when you're looking at a medical condition, you really want to make sure you have all the safeguards in place.
thank you.
Thank you.